My name is Ryan Billia. The company is Rumble Audio, and it's in East Williamsburg, Brooklyn, New York. My background is in advertising and television. I wanted to kind of focus a little bit more on film. So I built really a one-stop shop where people could come in, they had a budget that worked for me, worked for them, and say, okay, we can do the whole thing here. So I do everything from sound editorial, ADR, Foley, final mix, and could do print masters in here if for some reason you're going to film. There's not a lot of audio post in Brooklyn. It's a lot of music studios, some music studios that are doing audio post, but I couldn't find a studio that was focusing solely on audio post. Williamsburg made sense because it's kind of a creative center of Brooklyn and of New York. Even in this neighborhood, there's a few production spaces. It's currently the only Dolby approved mix stage in Brooklyn. And importantly, that's on the L train, which makes it easy for people to get to here from Manhattan. I really like to look at sound design from a conceptual perspective. So really talking to the directors about the emotion that's supposed to be felt in that place. So I kind of do it in stages. I focus and I do a dialogue pass and a background pass. And then after that, I start cutting specifics, basically cutting hard effects. And then I will do my Foley pass. There is a design element to that, is you're kind of picking and choosing sounds that work, that represent the image that's on screen, but also that work timing-wise. Sometimes you're sort of thinking about the rhythm of the scene, the way somebody's kind of stepping up and opening a door, for example, and you think about the key, and then the key in the lock, and then the creak on the door, and everything kind of has this rhythmic jump to it. I would say that's just as much of a design as grabbing some synth sounds or processing a vocal and putting it into wind, or taking a lion and putting it in a car, which is a pretty common sort of commercial sound design thing. And then at that point, you're kind of, for me, since I often do everything myself from top to bottom, the film is maybe 85% mixed at that point. Then you start really kind of focusing in on leveling and placing and panning and reverbs and all of that. The studio's been open for a year this month, and in that time, I've done, I think probably about 4 or 5 features have come through in that time. Probably the same amount of shorts. In February of this past year, we did a film called Before I Disappear. The supervising sound editor is a good friend of mine named Rich Bologna, and he came in and was working in the space. I finished a recent film called Pangea that I did all by myself, which is making the festival circuit now and was shot in Thailand. And so the first film I mixed in the space almost a year ago was a film called Lando, directed by Aaron Katz and Martha Stevens, starring Erland Nelson and Paul Einhorn. It's kind of a buddy comedy about 2 older ex-brother-in-laws on a sort of romp through Iceland and the experiences that can happen there.
Pink-footed goose with caramelized apples. Can you think pink-footed goose?
It could be good.
Yeah, when in Rome, you know how that is.
They shot it relatively quickly. I think they shot it in about a month or so. Came back, they cut it in about 6 weeks, passed it off to me, and I had about 4 weeks to do the sound edit and mix. So the whole process was a pretty quick process. I had worked with Martha on her previous film called Pilgrim Song, so she knew me and we kind of had worked together, and I'd worked with a few of her people associated with the project, but I'd never worked with Aaron. They're very focused on sound, but they're also really focused on reality and making sure that everything feels authentic and real and true. They're anti-ADR. They said that from the very beginning. And so we lucked out that we had a great production sound mixer by the name of Anthony Enns. I had a great guide track. The production was super clean, so we ended up not having to do any ADR except for one single okay. But other than that, yeah, the audio was really super clean, which is all you can really hope for. First third of the film takes place sort of in in America before they go, but then once they're in Iceland, a lot of it takes place in Reykjavik and stuff. So that's urban, stuff that have a lot of sounds that work in the sound effects library. But as they leave Reykjavik and they start heading out into the backwoods of Iceland, you start getting into these environments that are unlike any other place in the world. So they have a very specific sound. There's a great scene where they're at a geyser called Stroker. This is a huge geyser, and they had good sound, but obviously they couldn't have the camera and they couldn't have the mic equipment or anything too close because it's gonna get soaked in water. So the guide track had it sounding a little bit like, that kind of a sound. So we really wanted to build up and feel the weight of this geyser. So the sound of that geyser is stacked 6 or 7 different sounds that make up that geyser burst, including some low frequency rumbles, 2 different waterfall sprays, an actual geyser blast.
Come on, stroke it out of there. Boom, 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 boom. All right, here we go. Hey, abracadabra. You're gonna make me cry. Hurry up, get on out of there, guy. Come on.
Yep,
Come
something's...
on. Hey, yes! There it is! Woo! All right, yay! How about that, Mother Roo?
And then amazingly enough, while they were shooting, the geyser actually went off twice in a row. We had a chance to actually duplicate the sound and make the second one even a little bit bigger. So it kind of startles the audience because as the actors and the audience aren't prepared for it, so it kind of takes you off guard that it happens a second time.
I can't see jack crap, man. Hold on. Windshield wipers. God, I can't see nothing. Here, take my camera. Oh, God, we got another one. All right. All right.
Right off the bat, he loved it. He was like, yep, that's what it sounded like. That's what I remember. Their note was, can we go bigger? When Martha got there, can we even go a little bit bigger? So I said, sure. And bigger, can mean as much as just turning it up, adding a little bit more rumble to the EQ. That we kind of brought out a little bit more, and really sort of volume riding the back end of the geyser so that you have the blast, but you also feel the water, kind of the weight of the water hitting the rocks once the spray is done. So their influence was great, and it was a lot about the sort of the shape of the sound and its sort of attack on the audience. So I have a number of different libraries that I've worked with, as well as recordings that I've made in the past and since I've had the studio. But right when I built the studio, I actually applied for the hybrid library with Pro Sound Effects and actually received it only a few weeks before, maybe even 1 week before I started cutting Lando. When you know the library, you just go to sounds that you think of. But when you don't know the library, you kind of search in broad terms. And then you begin to kind of flip through sounds, and maybe a sound that's labeled something you might not have jumped to shows up, and you think, wow, there's actually a little part of that sound that works really, really well, which, for example, in the geyser scene, as I was saying, there's some waterfalls, which, yeah, you probably think a waterfall with a geyser, but at the same time, they were just chunks of the waterfall sounds that I was finding that really kind of made up the spray and worked really, really well. There's a lot of surround ambiances, which I don't normally use, but they were really beautiful. There's some great wind and ocean wave sounds, which obviously in Iceland I used quite a bit of, and that was really nice because I just dropped this surround background in and it just filled out the scene really, really beautifully. Also a lot of great single Foley sounds. Wood creaks, bed creaks, foot creaks, which you have in lots of libraries have them, but there was something about them. They were really crisp and really sharp, so they just cut in really beautifully. And the fact that there was a long stack of a whole bunch of them in sequence, I could just grab, a half-second little creak and be able to kind of nudge that around versus having a long recording of creaks and having to cut my own sections out. I also got the Expansion 1 library along with it because it did fill in some gaps that I thought were there in the hybrid library, which I found extremely useful. A lot of the stuff that's in there, like the room tones, the ambiances, there's some more ambiances in there that are great, and also the cinematic trailer production elements, those kind of the big booms and whooshes and things that you kind of have in in a lot of trailer sounds. I've used that a lot, and you know, look forward to more of those coming out in the future. Budgets across the board are getting a lot smaller. That was sort of my inspiration to build this studio. I saw that there really weren't a lot of, quote, mid-sized studios, very similarly to what happened in the music industry maybe 10 years ago, where a lot of these big music studios, they couldn't, you know, budgets for making records was going downhill, so these big studios just couldn't make it work. The need for high quality has never changed. We have to work with making sure that we're creating quality sound, quality film, everything looks great, but in a shorter amount of time and with less money. That's caused people to break out of the box a little bit and try new things, and sometimes at great success, you know. And I've seen some amazing films that have come out that have been done on a, quote, shoestring budget, some that I've even worked on myself. But overall, I'm really excited to see where it's going from here, and I'm excited to be a part of it.